But I started watching House of Cards, or not, sorry, not House of Cards, The West Wing, in part because it's supposed to be like one of the best shows of all time.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's living up to that. It is, the writing is phenomenal. And I think too, it's not like triggering my political show aversion right now because it's from 1999.
Mm.
And so it is so far removed from modern American politics, it like practically doesn't feel real. We're talking about a show that is pre Columbine, pre 9/11.
Damn.
You know, don't ask, don't tell is half debated in one of the episodes. There's a reference to a character who's meant as like a Matthew Shepard analog
Mhm.
at one point. Like, we are so far back in what we consider to be like monumental moments in American history and in queer rights, and that it it feels like fantasy.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then there's like occasionally there'll be things where it's like, ah, we have not changed in 25 years.
Yay. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that old. It just seems kind of eternal to me. Like it's one of the shows that has always existed. When was it made? It just appeared when the first TVs were made.
No, that's Star Trek the original series.
So true. So true. West Wing Ponfar. Let me go to AO3 real quick. Also, let me set a new Discord status.
Oh.
Reference to 2 series I have not watched. Because I haven't watched the original series.
Wow, I don't know what to do with that. I'm now trying to think about like which characters would be the best in an AO3 West Wing.
The crossover you didn't know you needed.
Right, the West Wing fuck or die uh, scenario.
Sorry, you were talking about politics and it was insightful, and then I had to save my shit.
No, I mean, there's a lot of that show. Like, yeah, there's some stuff on politics, but it's largely about like the interplay between the characters.
Mhm.
And also because it's 1999 and it was a highly successful show, there are many actors that I recognize, but they look like babies
Yeah.
because this was 25 years ago. And so, like, Elizabeth Moss is in it and Rob Lowe. And, like, Jesus Christ, they're infants.
Has Rob Lowe ever not been 50? Because that, again, is just an eternal state of him being middle-aged. I cannot imagine a young Rob Lowe.
He looks like he's 35,
Mhm.
maybe 40.
Yeah. Okay, I
So,
can
like,
accept that.
he's approaching middle age.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny to see that. But the writing is phenomenal. The delivery is just so quick.
Mhm.
I like actually almost have to pay attention. It's not something that I can just like put on in the background as I'm playing a video game.
Mhm.
So I like actually have to pay attention to what's going on if I want to pick up the plot points. As a lot of shows do in their first season, we don't have like recurring through lines for the first half of the first season, and then sort of once they find their stride you start getting like recurring bits,
Yeah.
and like recurring plot points. What have you been dedicating your media energy to lately?
You're doing like the Lord Vetinari steepled fingers. I know that the thing I have to say is, well, I was going to say shameful, but no, because I went on a journey and I recently read Akatar. I was just reflecting, as I often am. And I was thinking, like, well, Akatar is stupid and it's dumb and it's for stupid, dumb, not smart people. I'm not like other girls. And then I was thinking about the stupid, dumb shit that I read, like Hot and Badgered or any of the other weird, dumb garbage, Commitment Ranch. And I was like, okay, I think internalized misogyny may be afoot here. I may be dismissing ACOTAR out of hand because it's something mainstream that a lot of women like and it's widely ridiculed. And maybe I need to give it a chance and see for myself what is happening with ACOTAR. So I read the whole thing and it is very bad. It is worse than I imagined it could be. These immortals are so heterosexual that gender roles are just deeply baked into their society. It's Regency England or whatever with pointy ears. It's like their goddess has all of this inherent divine womanhood, fertility magic. Wee you, turf alert. Ah, get away, go, leave. And two of the characters, Tamlin and Lucian, have definitely explored each other's bodies, and that is not written on the page, but it's implied by me reading it. Sarah J. Maas didn't imply it, but I imply it. I impose that onto them. But it's just so shockingly straight, and I'm looking at it like, really? You all are immortal. And so you've decided that you are going to commit just to the most boring cishet society ever. Okay, fine. If there were gay people, that might make me like it more.
This is not a universal rule of fantasy, unfortunately. But I think we should make it one of our, I don't know, maybe we need to establish like the fandom apprentices desires for fantasy.
Yeah, our aspirations, our criteria. I don't know.
We can workshop the name, but I would say that the first one is that the length of a character's life, or the length of of a character or species lifespan beyond that of a human's, should be directly correlated with how definitely queer they are.
Yes.
And if you are immortal, you're queer. There
Mhm.
cannot be cishet immortals. It's just
Absolutely not.
bad writing. However, speaking of tragically cishet immortals, do we want to talk about Lord of the Rings?
Hell yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Fandom Apprentice. My name is Rin. I read Lord of the Rings as a kid, and it had a profound effect on my love of fantasy, on how I run tabletop games, and how I've lived the rest of my life. And during the early parts of the pandemic, which is now officially over 5 years old.
Happy birthday, pandemic. I hope you enjoy kindergarten.
Yeah, we're recording this in March of 2025, if that wasn't clear. But during the early parts of the pandemic, I decided to share my love of Lord of the Rings, which I hadn't touched in a little while, with my dear friend Sam.
Hello, I'm Sam. I'm the other one. We are moving through this at a good clip. Now I only have one movie left before I will have consumed all of the main essential Lord of the Rings canon. So I'm almost caught up at this point. But Two Towers is definitely a pretty big departure from the book. So I'm not sure where the rest of this is going to go.
Yeah, we have read all of the books. We are now on the movies. Um, Speaking of, I do want to bring up one thing. We're joined by a bunch of new actors in Two Towers, one of whom we saw bits and pieces of in the first movie, but now is plays a major role, is Andy Serkis as Gollum.
Mhm.
And Andy Serkis in 2020 read the full text of The Hobbit and streamed it as a fundraiser,
Oh, I love that.
and then was recruited to record new audiobook versions of both The Hobbit and all of the Lord of the Rings books. And I just thought that was very fun because that's the story of our podcast is
Yeah.
reading The Hobbit distanced to each other during lockdown and deciding then to do more with it.
Yeah, I love that. That makes me happy.
He is also just a phenomenal fucking actor, but we'll talk about that more as we go in. Um, I don't have like a deep dive this time around in the way that we did last time.
I also don't have a super deep dive because we're kind of in the mushy middle right now because we had talked last time about a bunch of things like the soundtrack and the costumes, which if you haven't listened to our first movie episode, go back. We established a lot of things in that one and then come back here. But so now I'm seeing how all of that stuff is continuing through this movie, but I don't know how it's all going to come together or what the final result of a lot of things is going to be. So it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to know what else I should be looking out for to really go into. I feel like once we finish Return of the King, then with the benefit of hindsight, I'll be able to go, oh, this thing was happening and this thing is interesting. But now the first impressions are out of the way. And so I'm just trying to keep up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of contrasts, like you said, between from the book to the movie in this one. It feels more like a retelling. In doing our research for the last episode, I was reading a lot of criticism of the movies as like abandoning the nuances of the books for a more swashbuckling, like swords and sorcery vibe. And I started to feel some of that more this time around.
Hmm.
It's still a great movie. Like, to be clear, I think some of the choices they made in this movie work. Some of the choices they made in this movie don't work as much. And some of them I kind of question why it was necessary or why they made the choice. One of the pieces that, as I was doing research for this episode, I found an interview with Peter Jackson, who said that the first movie is centered around Frodo as the hero, and like the editing reflects that. It's you're supposed to see Frodo at the center of the shots. Anything that's not focused on Frodo will come back to him. Like things that are away from Frodo feel as if they're going to be pulled back to him. This movie does that with Aragorn. Aragorn is the central figure of the Two Towers. So we'll see. I kind of want to keep that in mind when we go into Return of the King and see, like, all right, how do they now marry those two? One of the changes that I thought worked really well for this movie was the intercutting of the multiple stories, because in the book,
Yeah.
like, they're separated by the two books, right? You have the whole first book being like, this is Merry and Pippin and the hunters and the Rohirrim, and the second book is all Frodo and Sam, and that doesn't fly as well in a movie.
Yeah. It helped to be able to go back and forth and understand which things were happening simultaneously because as much as it's nice to trust your audience, and there are definitely some parts in this where I do feel respected as an audience member in ways that I maybe don't with other contemporary movies. That's one thing, but I think if we had split it up that way, it would just be very confusing. And you have a visual medium. You're allowed to do stuff like that and have it make sense.
With this visual medium, I really love all the sweeping shots that they get, all the helicopter
Hmm.
shots of the landscape of New Zealand, because it's gorgeous. And also, I'm really enjoying the sweeping shots where of the three hunters running, where Gimli is like a quarter mile behind the other two, just
Gimli.
slowly running.
He's got short legs.
He does. The other piece of trivia, I know everyone knows the piece of trivia that Viggo Mortensen broke his toe when he kicked an orc helmet at the beginning of the movie.
Mhm.
But Orlando Bloom and Brett Beatty, who's the stunt double for John Rhys Davies, were also injured during
Oh no.
this. Uh, Orlando Bloom cracked 3 ribs falling off a horse,
Oh, Jesus.
and Brett Beatty dislocated his knee. And so apparently they'd be doing these running scenes, and then the director would call cut, and they'd just all start shouting.
Oh, no. There's one scene where I think it's Pippin is about to be trampled by a horse, and it's this almost comical shot of him in distress on the ground, and then you're looking up and seeing the horse's legs from below as they bear down. And that is what I think is going to happen to me every time I get near a horse. I am not the biggest fan of horses. I am very scared of them.
But your spouse is a big fan of horses?
And we were getting their horse commentary because the way we did this one, the first movie we watched together in person, this one we did a Discord call, synchronized pause play situation, which I do feel like counting in for the podcast has really helped us hone that skill because we were perfectly in sync, which was nice.
Yeah, even though we paused a couple of times because it is a 4-hour movie,
Yes, we did the extended edition, naturally. Go big or go home.
obviously. I just kind of have thoughts chronologically through the movie. So we can talk through them chronologically and then as we have thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good. I had a couple of just overall vibes besides the ones we've already talked about. If I had seen this movie as a kid, it 1,000% would have given me nightmares. It's definitely a much darker tone than Fellowship, which I guess is true. It's the case in the books too, but I didn't really think about it as being that different because I was experiencing all as kind of one continuous thing. This movie is depressing and scary and has a lot of blood and guts and death, and I would have been afraid of it as a child. But on the flip side of positive things, after our conversation last time, I was going into it thinking about it as an opera and paying a lot more attention to the soundtrack, and that was very rewarding. So I was glad to like have that in my noggin. And also just so many dreamy sighs about Aragorn. Somehow that man putting on clothing feels indecent. It was just I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's just the everything. His hair is like always a little wet. He's always a little grimy. I don't know. It's a lot. It's arresting.
There is of course the famous double door opening scene
Mhm.
later in this movie, and that happened, and literally all 3 of us all made noises.
There were sounds. It's you can't help it. Listeners, just go look it up unless you're driving or something. Just go watch it for personal reasons. It's great. Everyone can appreciate. Just I'm at a loss.
The amount of people, yeah, the amount of people from our generation who I know that was a sexual awakening for, like that specific scene,
Mhm.
like it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I don't think it needs any further elaboration. We just have to talk about it and make vague, horny gestures because, oh my God, look at him.
The when he's putting on armor in the Helm's Deep scene, it has the same energy as the slow rolling up of the sleeves.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's cuz forearms.
And just the deliberate, the preparation, the carefulness. There's a lot. There's a lot there.
Speaking of forearms, there's in the Dead Marshes scene, there's a slow shot of the Nazgul gauntlets up
Hmm.
to the hood and then the slow pan down to the fell beast. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant reveal of the Nazgul now being on winged mounts.
And the fell beast is fucking unsettling. It's like a worm with wings. I don't know how to describe it. It's a unique creature.
It's sort of vaguely wyverny and just gross. There's also kind of like a fairly frequent use of slow-mo
Hmm.
in this, which I feel would be weird in a modern film, but it works well in this movie, I think, particularly because we're used to Tolkien lingering for pages on small details.
Hmm.
And so for us to be pulled into a specific shot with the slow motion makes total sense. It feels like an adaptation of that prosaic waxing that Tolkien does.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel jarring or out of place. It all flows very smoothly.
Right, because they don't hard cut between slow mo and up to speed.
Mhm.
It's they sort of slowly bring it back up to speed.
Yeah.
Or they cut away and it's not immediately to a high speed moment. One of the things we get super early that I fucking love is the design of the Rohirrim.
Yes.
I love the design of the Rohirrim. Their armor, everything in Edoras, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute or two. But they very clearly, the costume designers and the concept artists clearly did their research, because we see that their armor and their weaponry mimics like actual historical finds for Anglo-Saxon and Viking era warriors. And I think a lot of the visuals are drawn more from Viking era warriors, in some ways. But there is, particularly when we meet Eomer's Eored fairly early on, we see the helmets. And that really called to mind, I'm sharing these with you now, two helmets, one from the Sutton Hoo find in England, which is an Anglo Saxon helmet from the, I want to say it's the 7th century.
Mhm.
And the second helmet that I just shared is the Broa helmet from Sweden, from an assemblage in Sweden. And there's some similarity as well to the Vendel assemblage, which is another Swedish grave find. And I'll put images on our socials of these helmets as well. But they're the detail on like the eyebrows, the facial features, the like eye mask piece of it is something we see on a lot of the armor. And I know a piece of that is to conceal the faces of the extras because many of them were played by women.
Hell yeah. Horse girls.
And also, yeah, and also it's quote unquote historically accurate.
I do, for the bit of research that I did do, I do have some gripes with the Rohirrim's costumes, but that was more about the regular people, the villagers, the extras, but we can get to that later.
Okay.
But their armor was very cool. I did like the horse carving thing on Aemra's helmet. I thought that was very neat. There's a lot of good horse carvings, which I appreciate.
Yeah, well, and a piece of that reminded me specifically of the Sutton Hoo helmet, which is the one on the left, in the picture that I sent you, which is a dragon carving.
Ooh.
And so for horses, which feature so heavily in obviously Rohirric culture, to take the place of the dragon, which you'd see in a more in an Anglo-Saxon bit of artwork, I think it's super well done.
Mhm.
Moving on from the Rohirrim, because I was just like scrubbing through this, and because it keeps cutting back and forth between the stories, it's a little bit my notes are a little disjointed.
I did have two more things about
Please.
the Rohirrim. The first one is that when we first see Theoden, he looks like shit in a good way, but they really just made a husk of a man who, if you sneezed on him, would probably turn to dust like a vampire. He was on the brink of death, which I hadn't visualized him as being in that bad of a state, but in terms of visual storytelling, it really worked. And unrelated to that, unless you did you have more
No, please.
on Théoden? And then the second thing is that I feel like so far the movies seem to be a bit kinder to Eowyn than the books. She's a little less helpless. She's a little less centered on this crush on Aragorn. She seems to have more of her own character and her own interests and ambitions. And I appreciated that. Even though I learned that the only time that two women talk to each other in these movies are, what is it, her comforting a lost child
Yeah, who just goes, "Where's mama?"
Mhm.
That's it.
So,
That's the only time.
yep, that's, unfortunate, but besides that, she seems to
It does mean that the Two Towers does pass the Bechdel test.
yay. But it's something. I'll take it. The bar is very low.
I guess honestly, yeah, this is a good time to talk about my other Rohirrim thoughts, particularly about like Meduseld.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I guess we'll go out of order here. The designs in Meduseld, I was like, where have I seen these before? And this is where I started to think more about, oh, this is drawn from some more like Nordic vibes. I sent you two pictures of pieces from the Broa and Vendel assemblages in Sweden. And that sort of interlocking knotwork is seen all over Edoras.
Mhm.
But also, we do see that kind of artwork in Anglo Saxon art as well. This piece is from an Anglo Saxon cross.
Oh, I love the picture that you showed me is a stone carving, but right next to it, it's been highlighted in different colors so you can see the different elements of it better, which I super appreciate because it's hard to tell the details in old ass weathered stone.
Well, and it's the coloration. Yeah, and it's the coloration that it would have been
Oh, hell yeah, it was painted.
at the time. I think so, yeah. And then again, another piece about a belt buckle from the Sutton Hoo ship burial, which again has sort of this interlocking knotwork. And all of these images will be up on our socials. So seeing all of that in Edoras was really cool. When we get to Edoras, we're following the three hunters on their horses after they've met Gandalf. We'll go back to the Gandalf scene in a little bit because we got to comment on that. But staying on the Rohirrim for a minute, there's the transition of the Rohirrim theme, which we hear in a number of different orchestrations throughout the movie. We first hear it when we first see Rohan, when they first come out from the Emyn Mule and look over the open space. Hear it in a brass orchestration.
Rohan, home of the Horse Lords.
This is one of the most recognizable themes in these movies, behind maybe the Fellowship theme and the Shire theme, frankly. You play this to any Lord of the Rings fan, they're going to know it.
Mhm.
But then in Edoras, we hear it solely on the Hardanger fiddle, which is a Norwegian style of fiddle. So again, pulling from this Nordic influence.
Ooh, very cool. Very different vibe.
And that plays over Eowyn leaving the body of Theodred and exiting out the front of Meduseld and seeing the hunters and Gandalf arriving, and the pennant tearing off and flying out of Edoras, and it comes and it falls down outside the walls, sort of
Mhm.
symbolizing Rohan in distress. And it comes and it falls at the feet of Aragorn's horse as he's entering Edoras, which I thought was a very cool way of showing like the nation of Rohan requesting his help.
He's literally taking up the banner of their cause.
Yes. And that was another slow mo moment where we linger on the shot of the banner falling and of Aragorn's focus on it. And then he turns his focus into Edoras.
Mhm.
As they enter, we get this sweeping counterclockwise moving shot of Edoras, which is built on, I think it's Mount Sunday in New Zealand. I half expected them to be stopped in the street by some guy going, "Do you get to the Cloud District very often?" Because that's Whiterun.
Mhm.
Like, almost shot for shot. If you wander counterclockwise around the walls of Whiterun in Skyrim, that's what the back of Dragon's Reach looks like. You can see very much where Bethesda drew their inspiration for Whiterun, and as somebody who has put multiple hundreds of hours into Skyrim, I recognized it immediately.
Have I told you my Skyrim tale of woe?
Maybe?
My relationship with Skyrim. So I have also sunk not hundreds of hours, but a respectable number of hours into Skyrim. But I have never completed any of the storylines because I was mostly playing it in college and I didn't have my own game system at that point. So I was playing it on other people's devices and I would get a couple of hours here and there. But I kept having to start a new game every time I would play it somewhere new. And so I just got so sick of the, "Oh, you're finally awake" cutscene and just replaying that beginning part over and over. It was my Sisyphean task was just to play the beginning of Skyrim infinitely and never get very far. There was one time I was house sitting for somebody and I was able to get far enough to marry Lydia. And I was just grinding trying to get there so I could feel like I accomplished something. But I actually have no idea what the plot of Skyrim is because I have never gotten far enough to figure that out.
That's okay. I think a lot of people ignore the main plot of Skyrim.
That's fair.
It's one of those games you can go, you can literally refuse the call
Hmm.
and go, fuck it.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
go
go.
wander around and fill my house with cheese.
Yeah, I was about to say pick flowers and collect cheese wheels. I also am not good at games that have any amount of stealing or pickpocketing, so I just feel bad for the people. There was my siblings still mock me because they were playing Skyrim and I was there at my mom's house, and they were in some castle and going to steal a long taffy treat from the side table in one of the servants' quarters. And I was like, no, you can't steal it. That's their treat. They're just a servant. They don't have a lot of money. They probably saved up for that long taffy treat. You're just going to take it? Why not just take from the king? Why are you going to take from this servant? And I just felt so racked with guilt about the long taffy treat. I don't think I have the right personality to succeed in Skyrim.
That's fair. Going back to Theoden being fucking gnarly,
Yes. Crispy old man.
truly, the orchestration of the Rohan theme behind Theoden being cured is incredible. As we see him coming back to himself, you get that brass version of the Rohan theme that we've already heard. And then as Theoden grasps the hilt of his sword, you get the Hardanger fiddle again.
Gandalf, breathe the free air again, my friend. Dark have been my dreams of late. Your fingers would remember their old strength better if they grasped your sword.
And then as the sword is drawn, we get a full orchestration of the theme,
Ooh.
which is just a really, really cool build. And so you get Theoden coming back into himself and realizing once again he's king. And then it fades out again as he asks, "Where is my son?"
Mm-hmm.
And you know how I said before we started recording I was going to talk about dead things?
Yes. Yes. Tell me about dead things.
I want to talk about Theodred's funeral.
Yes. Let's do it.
And my first thing was actually a costume thought. And I was wondering if you had noticed this as well. When we first see Theodred's body, and Eowyn is weeping over Theodred's body, they're both all dressed in white.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of cultures around the world where white is the color of mourning and death. And so I kind of like that was my assumption. And then when Wormtongue enters the room to harass Eowyn, he's all in black, and it's a very strong contrast.
Which, Wormtongue, side note, so fucking creepy in this movie. He was having his grimy little hands on Eowyn's face. I wanted to cut them off. Continue.
Well, quick sidebar. Do you know why he's so fucking creepy? It's because he doesn't have eyebrows.
Huh. Didn't realize that.
Apparently, the actor had to shave off his eyebrows on multiple occasions because he kept getting called back in for different shots. That's a super easy, like, uncanny valley activation, particularly when the character has other distinguishing features. I feel like if we don't see the character with eyebrows, we're like, oh, something's wrong about them,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like we do it with all sorts of like alien type characters. They just don't have eyebrows. Whenever you want a character to seem creepy, other than human, just take off their eyebrows.
Yeah, it's very subtle because I was mostly just focused on him being a creepy old man. But yeah, the lack of eyebrows doesn't help his case.
Yeah, you completely reshape the face.
Yeah. But funerals.
Theodred's funeral. Then when we go down to Theodred's funeral, everyone's in black.
Mm-hmm.
This is also one of the only times we see Legolas's bow unstrung as they're carrying their weapons in sort of a formal way in procession down to the tomb, which, thinking about it now, is kind of interesting. It's I don't know, I don't have the English words for it right now, or words in any other language because I don't speak any of those.
You're selling yourself short, but I understand what you're saying.
When Eowyn starts singing, we go from full orchestration to just like very light background strings
Mm-hmm.
as Eowyn sings a lament, and Miranda Otto delivers this so well. It's almost as if like it feels as if she's been waiting and can't hold it in any longer.
Yeah, it's got this kind of rawness to it where she has a lovely voice. She's an actress, she sounds fine, but it's not a beautiful musical performance. It sounds like somebody grieving and doing their duty in performing what they're supposed to perform, but it has an edge to it that I feel like works very well.
Yeah, and this is translated into Rohirric, which is just adapted Old English, but the translation reads, "Now dear Theodred lies in darkness, most loyal of fighters. The sound of the harp shall not wake the warrior, nor shall the man hold a golden wine cup, nor good hawk swing through the hall, nor the swift horse stamp in the courtyard. In evil death has sent forth the noble warrior. A song shall sing sorrowing minstrels in Meduseld that he was of men dearest to his lord and bravest of kinsmen." The only thing that says that this is not like something off the cuff for Eowyn is if you watch her singing that, all of the women behind her are mouthing the words along with her.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh my God. Now I need to go back and rewatch that and it'll be 1,000 times sadder.
Where it's clearly a known like traditional farewell to a warrior rather than something she's composing on the spot. And as she's singing and Theodred is placed into the tomb, there's a flash to Theoden's face. And that's heart wrenching because Bernard Hill is a fucking fantastic actor. And he has so many little monologues during this movie. He's also a Shakespearean trained actor, so like he brings that to the stage. But just with his face here in that single shot, I got a sense of like him thinking, how did I miss this? How did I allow this to happen? This is my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly afterwards, we get a conversation between Gandalf and Theoden where he weeps over his son and laments that his son is dead. And there's this little alas that these evil days should be mine speech. And it felt very similar thematically to the I wish the ring had never come to me exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with Gandalf there to provide reassurance.
Yeah. And then there's, I think this is after that scene because we're kind of going out of order with our notes, but there's another more somber conversation with Gandalf, with him and Aragorn, that's about Theoden. And just the way that it's shot is in front of this beautiful dark teal gradient. It's obviously supposed to just kind of represent nighttime, but there's no visible set pieces. It's all very low light. And I was thinking watching it, this feels very theatrical because we have Sir Ian McKellen fucking bringing the Shakespearean training so good. And it just really feels like it's a theatrical monologue. Yeah, and I think that really having it be in front of this plain, vague, suggesting of scenery background, and the way that it's lit, there's one light that is implied to be moonlight, but really feels more like a stage light, just gives it a very unique feel. There's other scenes that have kind of a dreamy quality that are not necessarily taking place anywhere specific. They're kind of in the astral realm where they're representing something greater. But I don't think that there's any shots that are exactly like that one. And it really, especially having the idea of opera in my mind, really has that opera vibe. It was very impressive to watch.
Yeah. Going back to like right before that scene, Gandalf's return,
Oh, yes, we should
right?
mention that Gandalf comes back.
Yeah, Gandalf comes back, which any viewer of the movie or reader of the book will know. But Gandalf's back. He did not perish. We do get a flashback right at the beginning of the movie and when he returns, describing what happened to him, his fight with the Balrog, his death, and his return. When they first meet Gandalf, like in the book, they think he's Sauron, and so they all attack. And I like that all of their attacks and how Gandalf stops them is exactly the same as in the book,
Mhm.
almost word for word interpreted into visual, which like they didn't have to do, but it's really fun for book readers to have that.
Yeah.
And then before we see his face, there's a combination of voices. They combine Christopher Lee's voice, Saruman, with Ian McKellen's voice. And I like how they shift from Christopher Lee's voice being in front to Ian McKellen's voice being in front to just Ian McKellen's voice. And that's when we see Gandalf's face.
And his face is obscured again, thinking about light, by this super, super bright light that's very much be not afraid, angel descending from heaven. And so, as it kind of feels like he's taking shape, as his voice is settling, his appearance is settling, and his friends are sort of reeling him in, bringing him back to his previous identity.
Yeah, and again here we get the soft, sort of low brass version of the fellowship theme that we hear frequently around the hunters. But the invoking of the fellowship theme here is again showing us that we've got one more element of the fellowship that's returned to us.
Mm.
But taking it back to I guess, other parts in this section of the movie. The Ents.
Yeah, the ends. They are not how I envisioned them, but it works.
Yeah, I also think that they're not quite exactly how I envisioned them. And I'm not sure how I envisioned them because now all I really can think of is the movie version.
Mhm. I was thinking much more tree trunk with shorter legs and less defined facial features and more just tree trunk with face on it.
Mm-hmm.
The movie ends are very leggy and very tall, but that makes sense because they have roots. There is also just kind of a little bit of a goofiness to the Ents that I don't think they have in the books. In the books, they are dead fucking serious all the time, and in the movies, they're a little bit silly. But we need some comic
Yeah.
relief for the movie, so.
Yeah, they also incorporated like bits of Tom Bombadil's personality into Treebeard and
Mhm.
moments from the Old Forest into the Fangorn scenes with Merry and Pippin, such as them getting swallowed by the tree. And there's certain lines from Tom Bombadil that are given to Treebeard, like the heed no nightly noises bit.
Mhm.
And that makes sense because they cut another one of these ancient forest characters. They wanted to make sure that they got the elements in.
Yeah.
The Ents were also part of one of the changes that I was sort of fine with. I understand why they did it, but it didn't really make sense to me, which is that the Ents initially refused to go to war.
Mhm.
And it's not until Treebeard sees the destruction on the borders of the forest as he's bringing Merry and Pippin out that the Ents choose to go and destroy Isengard. And I get you're trying to create a little bit more tension, but it's not even like long tension. And it's interspersed with the beginning of the Helm's Deep battle. So I kind of don't feel like we needed that.
Yeah. Yeah, the tension could have just been the extremely long wait for them to say things slowly. I don't think that it fully needed to be done that way, but
Yeah, and I understand why they like cut quick beam. We didn't need an additional Ent for that, but I don't think necessarily you had to have the refusal. And the refusal mirrors Faramir's refusal, like Faramir's characterization in the movie. I kind of felt like they assassinated Faramir's character.
yeah, Faramir's kind of an asshole in this one. He's not his priorities are different. He's like, "Oh, hell yeah, we're bringing the ring to my father and we're going to use it." Like, "What? Dude, that was not at all what you were like in the books."
Yeah, I
He just wants his dad's approval.
right, that's what they were setting up. But I feel like in the books, Faramir being the opposite of Boromir is enough to show you what Denethor values
Mhm.
and why Faramir can't get Denethor's approval without him trying to be more like Boromir. And also Faramir's assistance of Sam and Frodo is meant as a parallel to Aragorn. It's meant to show that, oh, the men of Gondor are still men of Numenor.
Yeah.
That power, that grace still runs in their blood.
Yeah, and I also feel like with Boromir being more sympathetic in the movies, then Faramir also becomes a little bit more of an asshole. It all just kind of evens out and dilutes both of them in a way that they have a more fleshed out sibling relationship, and their relationship to Denethor as his sons is explored in a way that's kind of interesting, but they don't work as well as foils for each other.
Yeah, I agree. Denethor also doesn't appear in the shortened version of the movie, the theatrical cut. I guess the
Mhm.
real version of the movie. We only see Denethor in the extended version.
That whatever happens with the tomato is not in this one. I am simply thrilled to see what that's going to be about.
Yeah, that's Return of the King. Don't worry, we'll get there.
I'm excited.
Do you have anything else before we get into Helm's Deep?
Right? I think this is before Helm's Deep. Is Eowyn and Elrond's confrontation?
Arwen.
Arwen. Fuck. I wrote down the name of the wrong lady. There's so few. I should really keep them straight. Arwen. So yeah, that definitely was not in the book. Um, oh, listeners, it's been a day. I'm tired. Anyway, Arwen and Elrond's confrontation was not outlined in the book. We know that it happens and that it was tense and bitter, but we actually see them hashing out Arwen's decision to stay, which I think was done really well. And it also weaves in some bits from the appendices about her eventual death and Aragorn's eventual death and her having to live without him. And Elrond is painting this picture of how sad and depressing her future is going to be. And it works really well. And I'm glad that we got to see it. I think that it's perfectly effective in the books, but in the movies, it was fun to get a different perspective. I think that was fleshed out well.
Yeah, I like that both in the last movie and in this movie, we've gotten more of Aragorn and Arwen's relationship. I think similar to your comments about Sam and Rosie,
Hmm.
it's nice to have an established relationship between these two that we see before they're married,
Yeah.
which even in the books, we kind of don't see after they're married either.
Hmm.
We only get it in the appendices.
In the books, they're very chaste. In the movies, they are definitely fucking. They have either fucked immediately before the scene begins, or they will immediately after, or maybe both. The sexual tension between those two is palpable. And I love that for them.
Honestly, and also they're just a bisexual dream.
They really are.
Like
It's a
like
gift.
cool. I'm so excited for the two of you to have fun. Are you looking for a third?
I'm imagining one of those, like when you go to the deli and you have to take a number. Like I'll just go up and pull my little number and wait my turn.
Are there unicorns in Middle Earth?
There can
Because
be.
there can be at least
Brain cell.
uh let's see.
But yeah, that's all I had before Helm's Deep.
Okay. Oh, the other thing that I do have before Helm's Deep, I have weird feelings about the warg fight and Aragorn going over the cliff.
Okay, tell me about it.
I get that Aragorn's unconsciousness then lets us do the Arwen scene, but again, it's kind of an unnecessary piece of tension.
Hmm.
I feel like for Aragorn to go missing and they think he's dead. And yes, it then does allow him to arrive back in Helm's Deep and open double doors and uh, drive us all into a tizzy. But yeah, it was just like, here, let's just add another battle, I guess.
And I will say the battles, and especially Helm's Deep, which we're about to get to, are very engaging. And I have gone on record on the show saying that I zone out during combat. But I felt engaged. I felt compelled. I was feeling the tension. I was excited to see what was going to happen. So even though the battles just kind of kept happening, it was fine. I was having fun.
Yeah, the Battle of Helm's Deep is a large portion of the movie, and it gets intercut with scenes of Frodo and Sam and their interactions with Faramir, and then the battle at Osgiliath, and then also intercut with scenes of the Ents at Isengard.
Mhm.
One of the changes that I didn't mind was the elves showing up at Helm's Deep. It was a little weird, and I was reading that it was in part because initially they'd filmed scenes where when after Arwen has her confrontation with her father, she's the one that brings the elves down to Helm's Deep.
That's what I thought was implied because they're having this conversation, and what the end of their conversation wants us to believe is that despite all her protestations, Arwen has been convinced that she's going on the ship and she's sailing away. And so we see her riding off in this solemn procession with a bunch of other elves, and then all the solemn elves show up at Helm's Deep. So I thought it was implied that those things were connected, but it's not explicitly she's not there, and we don't see her telling them to go help. But I made that connection in my brain.
Right. And we see Haldir, who we met in Lothlorien last time.
Mhm.
He's the military commander in Lothlorien. And so it's implied that these are Lothlorien elves, not Rivendell elves.
Oh, yeah, true. So just unrelated elves.
Yeah, apparently by the time they decided to change that, they'd already filmed a bunch of the scenes with the elves fighting in Helm's Deep.
Mhm.
So they're like, all right, fine, I guess we'll mess with it a little bit. I guess we'll keep it. I know this has been brought up by critics galore for many years, and that we are not film critics. But can I say, modern directors, please take fucking note of the lighting in the Helm's Deep battle, because we can all tell that it's still nighttime.
Mhm.
It's okay. It doesn't need to not be visible. We can see all the details. When the actors' faces are telling us a story, we can see that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it does get chaotic and confusing. It gets chaotic and confusing in the book too, but that is managed with us as an audience still being able to see everything. I'm just really bitter about that one episode in, what is it, season 7 of Game of Thrones? Just fuck. Anyway,
I've never been to Game of Thrones, but I will be on your side blindly anyway. So I'll say fuck that episode. But one of the things that this lighting does allow us to see is a kind of surprising amount of gore. There these movies are fairly graphic in terms of showing blood and guts in a way that isn't just random sprays of red mist. It feels like a kind of realistic level of gore in a way that I don't feel like I see a lot in modern movies, especially for something like Lord of the Rings that has kind of a family friendly reputation.
mhm.
I don't know how the modern Hobbit movies compare on that score, but I do feel like in general, and people smarter than me have expounded on this in more ways, a lot of our media is becoming increasingly sanitized. And so this definitely felt like I respect you enough as a viewer to show you that there's blood and guts in this movie. And not in a slasher, horror, shock value way, but yeah, if people's heads get cut off, there's going to be some bits that come out. In towards the end at Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, the dead rabbits are very real and very present, and we see Gollum like cracking their spines, and it's really visceral, but in a way that feels effective. And I feel like, yes, I'm an adult. I can handle watching this.
Yeah, it's battle. It's not
Mhm.
meant to be sanitized. It's like that line in The Hogfather, it's a sword, it's not meant to be safe.
I don't think I know. I don't think I know that one.
It's another Discworld Terry Pratchett bit.
Ah, very nice.
One of the other moments that we all made fun of was the recruiting of the old men and young boys.
Yes. Oh my. I got so mad about that. It's like every strong lad who can hold a sword. Like, excuse you, what about the strong women? You are sending your oldest, crustiest men. And this is not me editorializing. We see some pensioners getting handed weapons. And like, there's perfectly healthy young women down in the caves. Why aren't they out here?
Particularly after not an hour earlier, we have a quote from Eowyn where she's practicing with a sword, and Aragorn is talking to her about it. Where Eowyn says that the women of Rohan learned long ago that those who do not have swords can still die upon them,
Mhm.
which implies that the women of Rohan will take up arms when they have to.
And maybe can leave the fucking kids, because although we're saying women and children into the caves, there are many lingering shots of kids who can't be older than 9. putting on helmets and getting ready for war. And we're supposed to feel very sad about that. And we should, because it is very sad. But why isn't that fucking kid in the cave? What's the cutoff?
And I understand that, again, this is also a piece from the text of Tolkien.
Mhm.
But in this movie where we're trying to give more agency to women characters than Tolkien gives in his books, we could have achieved the same effect by having the old, both men and women, and young kids in the caves, as because we get shots of, the women and children huddling with fear, but we could have achieved the same effect with like children and their grandparents.
Mhm.
I understand why they did it, and maybe this is just us being annoying raging feminists, but like, come on. However, one of the kids that we see throwing a rock at one point at the orcs is Viggo Mortensen's son,
Oh,
who's a big
so
fan of the
cute.
books,
Yeah.
which is very fucking cute. I love that. Speaking of Viggo Mortensen,
I will always speak of Viggo Mortensen. Yes.
yeah, and transitioning away from children, so you know how we have feelings about Aragorn.
Mm-hmm.
There's the little piece where Gimli and Aragorn go out Postern Gate and have a little sortie onto the bridge, and Gimli has Aragorn toss him, which is one, a fun callback to Fellowship where he refused to be tossed in the mines of Moria. But as you pointed out when we were watching this movie, Aragorn tosses Gimli one-handed
Mm-hmm.
across this gap that Gimli can't jump. And Gimli, with armor and weapons and all, has to be upwards of 200 pounds, if not more.
Yeah.
And he just chucks him one-handed.
Like a fucking frisbee.
Like, this man is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, and when we've gotten the lingering shots of his hands delicately pinning his armor on prior to the battle, I am filled with thoughts of a line from one of our favorite rom-coms, Satisfaction Guaranteed, of describing one of the characters' arms: strong enough to hold her down, but gentle enough to lift her up.
Yes. Oh my God. That's exactly it. It's exactly it, listeners.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Um,
And speaking of tossing Gimli, I have not had too much to say about Gimli thus far, but his characterization in especially in this movie is really leaning more into him as comic relief, and he is very
mhm.
funny, and I do still love him. He's still my boy, but it's different, and I miss my kind of serious poetic Gimli. But I did love the in the tossing scene, he's like, "You'll never speak to anyone about this." It's like, yes, yes, of course. And we still get the scorekeeping, which is very fun. And also just thinking of my little Gimli thoughts sort of earlier on when they're marching out, he's bantering with Eowyn and telling her a story about dwarf women and making all these jokes, and she's laughing. And I just love that they're like little besties. And when we were watching, I was saying, that would be me. I would be Eowyn. I would be Gimli's friend. We would be laughing together. I would make him disgusting soup.
Oh
No,
my
I would
god, the
make good soup.
disgusting soup theme.
I would make excellent soup.
Yeah, you'd get the Adam Driver good soup bit from Gimli there. Actually, that is one other piece in the soup scene. We have another recurring theme specific to Eowyn,
Ooh.
which we hear first during Theodred's funeral. And again, it's low brass, it's slow moving, and then we hear it sort of again quoted in this moment where she hands a terrible stew to Aragorn.
That's really funny.
Yeah, but it's an Eowyn specific theme, and we will
Mhm.
actually hear it again in Return of the King.
I'm sure.
But I just thought that was kind of amusing.
That's really good.
In the Helm's Deep scene, we get a couple of speeches from Bernard Hill, from Theoden, that are pulled from different places in the books. So speeches that Theoden gives but are not given in Helm's Deep in the books are now given in Helm's Deep. Specifically, the "Where now is the horse and the rider" scene at the
Mhm.
beginning when he's putting on his armor, where he's got the solo light shining upon him. Again, suggested to be moonlight shining through the window, but is instead like acts as a spotlight on this Shakespearean actor delivering a soliloquy on stage.
Mhm.
It has the feel of To Be or Not to Be.
Yeah.
And also, when I was reading about this, I learned something that I did not actually know before, um, which is this is obviously this is written by Tolkien. This is from the books. This is an adaptation of an Old English poem, The Wanderer.
Mhm.
Chwer com merg, chwer com mago, chwer her com mathum gifa, chwer com simla gesetu. Where is the horse? Where is the rider? Where is the giver of treasure? Where are the seats at the feast? Where are the revels in the hall? Alas for the bright cup! Alas for the mailed warrior! Alas for the splendor of the prince! How that time has passed away, dark under cover of night, as if it had never been.
Shit.
Yeah, and this is given later on as the Lament of the Rohirrim, where now is the horse and the rider, where is the horn that was blowing. But Bernard Hill delivers it as a not simply a speech, but again another eulogy, not just for his son, but for all of his people whom he does not think are going to make it out of here.
Mhm.
It's very clear throughout the lead up into the battle that Theoden has accepted that he is going to go down fighting, as are every one of his people. But it is better to go down fighting in a space where they might take some of the orcs with them.
I also took that moment as sort of a self-recrimination of like, where is the horse and the rider? Where have I been? What have I been doing this whole time? What the fuck happened to me? Sort of the same reckoning that we were dealing with earlier. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's very loaded.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece is right before they do this heavy cavalry sortie, going out finally on, dawn on the fifth day when Gandalf is supposed to return, with the "Now for Wrath, Now for Ruin, and the Red Dawn," which is taken from a speech at the Pelennor Fields
Mhm.
in the books, but now is placed here. And we'll have the rest of this speech delivered in Return of the King at the Pelennor Fields. So don't worry, we will still hear it, but it's interesting to, again, have this bit here. And then we do have the other change that they made to this movie, which is Éomer is not at Theoden's side this whole time. He is banished early on. And so Gandalf brings him back on the dawn of the fifth day and liberates Helm's Deep that way.
Yeah.
Which I suppose, we still do see the Huarns kind of in the distance, but I suppose it's sort of easier for the audience to accept because we don't have time to explain the Huarns. And we don't have
Mhm.
time to we do see them eating the orcs as the orcs flee, essentially,
There's just a rustle of the tops of the trees, which was very good.
and screaming.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's perhaps easier for the audience to understand. Ah, yes, we now have reinforcements here, and the reinforcements are people and horses, not trees.
Yeah.
During that reinforcement charge downhill, your spouse commented that all of those horses would break their legs.
Yeah, that is a steep decline. That's like a 45-degree angle that they're all just barreling down. That was another Skyrim moment of just descending a mountain on your horse.
Turns out they breed for Skyrim horses here in Rohan.
Clearly.
That's pretty much it for Helm's Deep, and then I have a last piece to close it out, but I want to make sure that you're getting everything you need as well.
Yeah, I didn't really have a ton on Helm's Deep. I didn't have a ton on the rest of the movie. I just had a brief note that Gollum/Smeagol was done well. But yeah, I think we're really seeing how much of the focus is away from Sam and Frodo by the fact that I have no notes about them. They're fine. They're there. They're not really the main focus here. This is Aragorn's movie.
Yeah, but we do we open on them and we close on them, just sort of reminding the audience that yes, this is Aragorn's movie, but the central plot and the main conflict will be resolved with these two little hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
We've waxed poetic a lot about hope, but as they're watching Osgiliath fall, Sam has this very long and beautiful speech on holding on to hope. And it's interspersed, and he continues giving this speech over the end of the fighting at Helm's Deep, over the last of the fighting at Isengard, as we're seeing victory in both places.
Mm-hmm.
But with Sam and Frodo, there is no victory. There is only another slog ahead of them. And it ends with the famous line where Frodo asks Sam, "What are we holding on to?" And Sam answers, "There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." Yeah, um, that's the central message of our show, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to follow that up. It's a perfect line. It's iconic for a reason.
Uh-huh. This movie holds up incredibly well 25 years later, 20 years later, in part because they put so much time and effort into practical effects. The CG, you can tell it's CG, but it still looks good.
Except maybe Merry and Pippin riding on Treebeard when you can kind of see the green outline around their hair from the green screen. That one is rough. But other than that, it's all really good.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, there's like a little haze around their heads. But like it's really well done all in all. They rotoscoped in Gollum, which is so they literally, because Andy Serkis was on set performing all of those physical actions, they drew over every single frame to animate in Gollum doing the motions that he did.
Oh, damn. I didn't realize that.
Which is why Gollum looks so good, is because he is essentially a computer suit placed over Andy Serkis
Mm-hmm.
rather than a fully CGI'd character. Most of the like forts were actual models. There is a miniature of Isengard, which apparently is reading somewhere. They built multiple like scale models. So they had a smaller model for like larger shots. But then they also made a 15-foot high miniature of Isengard.
Oh, damn.
So it was a quote unquote miniature. And apparently they referred to it as bigatures,
Oh, that's cute.
which is just the amount of work that they put into these. Apparently they spent literally dozens of hours on every single frame of Gollum, on every single frame of Treebeard. It took them weeks to construct Edoras. Apparently, the interiors of a lot of the buildings were used as like office space during the filming, so that like they didn't have to construct any additional buildings. They were built there. So
The most fun possible place to do paperwork.
yeah, you walk out of your office and oh look, here we are in Rohan.
I found a Reddit post with a picture of the bigature of the tower. And it's so funny because you have this elaborate, beautiful set. You have the tower rising up all majestic. And then once the green screen, or in this case, blue screen, cuts off, it's just a suburban neighborhood in the background. I'm going to send it to you on Discord. But yeah, there's just somebody's house back there, which is very jarring.
It's so fucking funny. It's a really well done movie. I enjoyed it. It felt more like an adaptation or a retelling than the first one did. The first one I think did a little bit better on the like direct to screen
Yeah.
translation of the book, but I think this one was overall a good movie, and they did a good job of making it a good movie rather than simply a good translation.
Yeah, it's very watchable. It's very fun. And I'm definitely along for the ride now because it has changed so much from the book. I don't know how Return of the King is going to play out, but I'm excited. I did have one gripe, one thing that I did do research on that
Mm.
just irked me a little bit, and it was about the Rohirrim, which we talked about before. So, not so much the soldiers, but the villagers do have a little bit of everyone in history only wore brown disease. And in this case, it's everyone in history only wore green disease. And I am not an expert in Anglo-Saxon clothing. So I don't know about the construction and the cuts of their garments. I can't speak to that. But what I do fucking know is that they had colors and they loved colors. People really underestimate the variety of dyes that were available to people throughout history. And we sort of have this image colloquially of all the peasants wore brown and gray and only the kings and queens had bright colors. No, stupid. Fuck that. Vibrant primary colors were super easily available. The Anglo-Saxons would have had access to, coincidentally, all three of these are plants with small yellow flowers. That has nothing to do with the fact that they're good dyes. It just happens that these three plants all look kind of similar. But madder, Madder, is a small flowering plant with bright red roots that you can use to get a red dye. Weld, you can get yellow from the flowers themselves. Woad produces blue from the leaves. So you have three super bright primaries right there. And there's a lot of modern historians who recreate those. And you can get basically every color of the fucking rainbow. You can get corals, you can get really cool greens and different shades of, obviously, lots of different browns and blacks and stuff. But the thing that's a little harder to determine than the sources of colors, because lots of things make colors, you can get dye from pretty much anything, is what mordants the Anglo-Saxons would have had access to. And a mordant is basically a chemical that fixes dye chemically onto fabric so that it doesn't wash out right away. And people trying to recreate Anglo-Saxon dyes have tried various things, and some are more effective than others. And that does also affect which textiles are well preserved and what textiles used to be dyed, but then were washed so many times that the dye has gone away and there's only faint traces of it. Hard to tell. But, and I get that also having all the Rohirrim in similar colors makes them visually unified. It tells a good story, but I would have loved to see more colorful, more fun outfits because there was wacky, wild, vibrant ornamentation amongst the Anglo-Saxons. And I'm really passionate about people knowing that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's like the painted ancient Greek statues. There was color everywhere. We're humans. We love shiny things.
Yeah, and particularly as we've noted, with them drawing so much like Nordic inspiration as well, a lot of the inspiration they're drawing is from pre-Viking Age Nordic nations, but during the Viking Age specifically, I know for a fact that the textiles were also super brightly colored. Yellows and reds were incredibly common. Yeah, there was also a multitude of browns and greens and blacks, but there's a ton of flowers that produce reds, that produce yellows, that produce blues. You could get a lot of these kind of wild out there color combinations.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it would have been fun, although I guess from a costume department standpoint, I suppose it's a lot easier to just be like everyone wears one color.
It does make sense movie-wise, but just as a history buff, I need people to know about the colors and the fucking sometimes garish combinations. People would just kind of wear whatever, and it was great. But other than that, it was great. Good movie. A plus.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch the third one. I haven't watched the third one in many years, so I'm excited to go back. I kind of can't remember exactly what they did that is different or the same. I guess one of the other things that's different about this movie is they start it and cut it off in different places than the Two Towers book does.
Hmm.
So, like, we don't see Shelob in this movie. We'll see her in the next movie, probably.
I remember when we were doing the reading for Two Towers, you not being sure where the book would start and where it would end, going, I'm not sure if this happens in this book or just in the movie. It is kind of mindfucky.
And, like, we had Boromir's death at the end of last movie, where it's the first chapter of the Two Towers book. So, again, I understand why they did certain things, particularly after spending so much time on like the Battle of Helm's Deep. I think putting the conflict for Frodo and Sam with Shelob at the end would have just been too much.
Yeah.
Like the ending of Two Towers, the movie is focused on the battles that the men are going through right now, as opposed to we'll focus more on individual issues in the next movie. And if you'd like to join us for that, you can do so. We will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode, which will be our final episode of new Lord of the Rings content for now. And we'll deliver more updates as to what you can all expect after that, either in the next episode or on our socials or in episodes that come later. You'll find out. But if you'd like to join us for all of that, both for the next episode and for what follows after, you can follow our podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, and on other podcast platforms if you're so inclined. Just, boost our numbers a little bit. You can leave us a rating and a review. You can leave comments on our podcast. You can leave us comments and follows on our social media, which is at FanAppPod on social media platforms, whichever ones we happen to be active on at the time. Tumblr, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, several of those I've literally never touched.
It's like a fun little scavenger hunt.
Yeah, some of them get regular updates. Find us where you will. And if you have a comment that you actually really want us to see, you can email us at thefandomapprentice@gmail.com. Am I missing anything?
No, I think that about covers it. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye.
The Phantom Apprentice is produced and edited by Rin and Sam. Our music is written and performed by James. You can hear more of his music on Spotify or on Bandcamp under the group Beiruz, Baeruz. Our art is by Casey Turgeon. You can find more of her work at KCT Designs on Instagram. The content discussed is the property of the Tolkien Estate and of Peter Jackson and New Line Cinemas, and is used here under fair use.